The mining station orbited Kepler 442b like a rusted crown, its metal bones groaning under the weight of constant work. Inside, Tiemann wiped the grease from his hands and stared at the broken coolant valve. 3 hours he'd been working on it, and the alien supervisor hadn't even thanked him. That was normal. Humans didn't get thanks in the Galactic Collective. He was 28 years old, and he'd spent half his life fixing machines that belonged to aliens who barely acknowledged his existence. Earth was part of the Collective now, had been for 200 years, but humans were still treated like pets. Useful pets sometimes. Annoying ones mostly. Tiemann's communicator buzzed. It was his sister, Huna. Her face appeared on the small screen, tired but smiling. "Still alive up there?" she asked. "Barely." "How's Earth?" "Same as always. I'm working on a new petition, trying to get humans access to advanced medical training. The Council keeps blocking it." Huna was a medical researcher, but she spent more time fighting for human rights than she did in the lab. "Listen, Tay, be careful. The Conquest Games are happening this week." Tiemann nodded. He'd heard about it. Every 10 years, the species in the Collective competed for prizes, territory, resources. It was a big show, mostly political. Humans weren't allowed to compete, of course. They weren't considered strong enough. "I'm on a mining station," Tiemann said. "Nothing's going to happen here." He was wrong. 2 days later, the news spread through the station like fire. The Vexial had won the Conquest Games. Commander Velshara, the famous alien general with 4 arms and skin like blue crystal, had led her fleet to an impossible victory. She'd outmaneuvered 7 other species, won every challenge. And now she got to claim her prize. The prize could be anything: territory, resources, technology, political, favors. Velshara chose a person. She chose Tiemann. When the guards came for him, he thought it was a mistake. He was in the maintenance tunnel, replacing a power coupling when they found him. 2 Vexial soldiers, their crystalline skin reflecting the dim lights, their 4 arms carrying weapons that could vaporize him before he could blink. "You are Tiemann of Earth?" one asked. "Yes, but I think you've got the wrong. Commander Velshara has claimed you as her prize from the Conquest Games. You will come with us." Tiemann's mind went blank. This had to be a joke. A cruel, stupid joke. "I'm nobody. I fix machines." Why would she? "We do not question the commander. Neither will you." They took him. Just like that. No explanation, no trial, no chance to say goodbye. They let him send one message to Huna, and then they put him on a transport ship. Within 6 hours, he was leaving the mining station, leaving human space, heading into the deep dark with aliens who wouldn't tell him anything. Huna's response came through just before they jumped to faster-than-light travel. "I'll find out why. I promise. Stay alive, Tay." The transport docked with Velshara's personal vessel 3 days later. The ship was called the Kethera, and it was beautiful in a cold, frightening way. All sharp angles and glowing crystal, built for war and research in equal measure. Tiemann was taken to quarters that were too nice for a prisoner. A large room with a bed, a desk, a window showing the stars. The door locked from the outside, but everything else felt almost comfortable. He waited. For hours, then days. Food appeared through a slot in the door. No one spoke to him. He tried talking to the guards, but they ignored him like he was furniture. On the 4th day, Velshara came. She was taller than any human, nearly 7 feet, with 4 arms that moved with disturbing grace. Her skin was crystalline and blue, her eyes were silver, and when she looked at Tiemann, he felt like she was reading every thought in his head. "You are confused," she said. Her voice was like ice cracking. "You could say that." Tiemann tried to sound braver than he felt. "Why am I here?" What do you want from me? I want you to be what you are. I'm an engineer. I fix coolant valves and power systems. That's it. Velshara's head tilted. You are human. That is what matters. Humans aren't special. Everyone in the collective knows that. We're weak. We're primitive. We're barely useful for basic labor. Is that what you believe? Teeman hesitated. He'd grown up hearing it. From alien teachers, from collective broadcasts, from the laws that kept humans in the lowest positions. But somewhere deep down, he'd always felt like it was wrong. Humans had built cities, had gone to space, had survived wars and disasters. They weren't nothing. I don't know what I believe, he said quietly. Velshara moved to the window. The collective rewrote your history. Did you know that? When humans joined us, the first records were sealed. The official story is that Earth welcomed us, that your people were peaceful and eager to learn. That's what happened, isn't it? No. Velshara turned back to him. 300 years ago, when our ships arrived at Earth, your people fought us. For 10 years, you fought with weapons that should not have worked, with strategies that made no sense, with a stubbornness that cost us thousands of soldiers. You lost because you lacked technology, not because you lacked strength. Teeman stared at her. You're lying. I have the records. I will show you. But first, you will prove to me that humans still have that strength. She produced a small device and placed it on the desk. It was a puzzle of some kind, glowing with alien symbols. Solve this, Velshara said. The average Vexil takes 4 hours. The best minds in the collective have solved it in 1 hour. Let us see what a human can do. She left him alone with the puzzle. Teeman sat down and studied it. The symbols meant nothing to him, but the pattern was there. Numbers, sequences, relationships. He stopped trying to understand the alien writing and just looked at the structure. 30 minutes later, he had it solved. When Velshara returned. She saw the completed puzzle, and something that might have been a smile crossed her crystalline face. Interesting, she said. What is this really about? Teeman demanded. Why me? Why now? Velshara's silver eyes fixed on him. Because something is coming. Something that will destroy the collective unless we change. And I believe that humans, with your chaotic minds and your refusal to surrender, are the only ones who can save us. That's insane. Perhaps. But I won the right to try. And you, Taemin of Earth, are going to help me prove it. The door closed behind her. And Teeman was left alone with 1,000 questions and the uncomfortable feeling that his life had just become far more complicated than fixing coolant valves. The tests started the next morning. Velshara would arrive with a new challenge every day. Sometimes it was a mechanical problem, sometimes a tactical simulation, sometimes just strange questions about how Teeman would handle impossible situations. He answered honestly because there was no point in lying. When she asked him how to attack a fortress with limited supplies, he suggested deception instead of force. When she gave him a broken alien device, he fixed it in ways the original designers hadn't considered. When she presented military scenarios, he found solutions that ignored the rules. You think sideways, Velshara observed one day. Every other species thinks in straight lines. They see a wall and try to break through it. You look for a door, or dig under, or convince the wall it doesn't need to be there. Teeman shrugged. I just think about what might work. That is precisely what makes you valuable. But valuable for what? That question haunted Teeman through the weeks. He was treated well, fed well, given access to entertainment systems and exercise equipment. But he was still a prisoner, still alone, still confused about his purpose. Then he met Geodat. It happened by accident. Teeman had been exploring the ship during one of the periods when his door was unlocked. Most of the Kethra was off limits, but he'd found a section that seemed abandoned. Old storage rooms, dusty corridors, equipment covered in sheets. He heard a voice speaking Korean. Timin followed the sound to a door that was half open. Inside was a room full of screens and old data files. And sitting at a terminal, muttering to himself in their native language, was another human. The man looked up, startled. He was older than Timin, maybe 50, with gray in his hair and scars on his hands. "You're human," Timin said stupidly. "So are you." The man stood up quickly. "How did you get here? Did Velshara bring you too?" "She claimed me from the Conquest Games. I'm Timin, Jiho." The older man looked nervous. "You shouldn't be here. If the guards find you, what are you doing here? How long have you been on this ship?" Jiho hesitated, then sighed. 7 years. I was a historian on Earth. I wrote papers about human culture, about our past. Velshara's people found my work and took me. She wanted me to research something the collective doesn't want anyone to know about. "The war," Timin said. "She told me humans fought when we first made contact." Jiho's eyes widened. "She told you? Then maybe she's finally ready." He turned to his screens. "Come here. I'll show you what they erased." The footage was old, grainy, but clear enough. Earth 300 years ago. Massive alien ships descending from the sky. And humans fighting back. Timin watched soldiers with primitive weapons taking down advanced fighters. He saw engineers hacking alien computers with code that shouldn't have worked. He saw civilians building traps, creating weapons from scrap, organizing resistance cells that confused and frustrated the vastly superior collective forces. "We lost," Jiho said quietly. "But we made them pay for every inch." The collective thought it would take weeks to subdue Earth. It took 10 years. And when it was over, they were so disturbed by human tactics that they rewrote everything. They made us look weak, made it seem like we'd joined willingly. Because if other species knew what humans were really capable of, they'd fear us. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because Velshara thinks we'll need that strength again." Jiho pulled up another file. "The Devourer Swarm. Have you heard of it?" Timin shook his head. "It's coming from outside our galaxy. A hive mind species that consumes everything. They've already destroyed the outer colonies. The collective has been fighting them for 3 years, and we're losing. Badly." The screens showed battle footage. Enormous organic ships, moving like insects, overwhelming collective fleets. Every time the aliens tried a strategy, the swarm adapted within hours. "The collective fights by the book," Jiho explained. "Established tactics, proven strategies, logical progressions. The swarm learns those patterns and counters them. But humans don't fight logically. We improvise. We change plans mid-battle. We do things that don't make sense until they work. And Velshara thinks I can help with this? She thinks humanity can help. You're the test. If you prove that human thinking can counter the swarm, should try to convince the collective to use more humans in the war." Timin felt the weight of it settle on his shoulders. "That's insane. I'm one person. I fix machines. You also solved her puzzle in half the time it should have taken. You've been passing every test she gives you. She's been watching humans for years, Timin. She believes in us more than we believe in ourselves." Over the next weeks, Timin and Jiho met in secret. The historian showed him more of the suppressed history, more footage of human ingenuity and stubbornness. And Timin began to understand what Velshara was doing. She was building a case. Every test he passed, every problem he solved, every creative solution he found was evidence. Evidence that humans weren't the weak, simple creatures the collective had labeled them. But there was resistance. Timin learned this when he overheard Velshara arguing with her second-in-command, a Vexel named Rixan. This obsession with humans will destroy your career, Rixon said. The Council already questions your judgment. If you push this further, the swarm will reach the core worlds within a year, Velshara interrupted. Everything we have tried has failed. We need a new approach. And you think a species that barely understands quantum physics can provide it? I think a species that survived 10 years against us, with primitive technology, might see solutions we cannot. It is a waste of time. And claiming that human as your prize was a political disaster. Then it is my disaster to manage. Teeman moved away from the door before they could catch him listening. But he'd heard enough. Velshara was risking everything on this gamble. On him. That night, she came to his quarters with new data. Tomorrow, we arrive at Collective Central Command, she said. You will meet the High Council. I am going to propose that you analyze our battle strategies against the swarm. They'll never agree to that. Probably not. But I won the conquest games. I have earned the right to make the attempt. She studied him with those silver eyes. Are you afraid? Yes. Good. Fear makes humans creative. It is one of your advantages. She turned to leave, then paused. Teeman, I need you to understand something. I am not doing this because I am kind. I am doing this because I believe survival requires it. Your species has been suppressed for too long. That suppression may cost us everything. Why do you care so much about humans? Velshara was quiet for a long moment. Because a human saved my home world once. A slave, someone no one valued. During an attack, our defense grid failed. Every Vexio engineer said it was impossible to repair in time. A human slave rewired the entire system in 20 minutes, using methods that made no sense to our logic. She saved 3 billion lives. Then she died in the attack anyway, and no one remembered her name. She left before Teeman could respond. He stood at the window, watching the stars stream past as the ship traveled faster than light. Somewhere out there, his sister was fighting for human rights using laws and petitions. Somewhere out there, the swarm was coming to destroy everything. And here he was, one human engineer, carrying the weight of his entire species' future. The Collective Central Command was a structure, so massive it had its own gravity. Built into an asteroid, it housed representatives from dozens of species. Military commanders, scientists, and politicians all working to manage an empire that spanned thousands of worlds. Teeman felt impossibly small as Velshara led him through corridors filled with aliens who stared at him like he was an exotic insect. Some looked curious. Most looked dismissive. A few looked hostile. The High Council chamber was a circular room with seats rising in tiers around a central platform. Representatives from each major species sat in their designated areas. At the highest point sat the Supreme Arbiter, Kolvev, a massive creature covered in metallic scales. Velshara stood on the central platform. Teeman stood beside her, trying not to shake. Commander Velshara, Kolveth's voice boomed. You requested this audience. Speak. I come to propose a new strategy against the Devourer Swarm, Velshara said. Her voice was calm, commanding. Our current approaches have failed. We need fresh perspective. We have the best military minds in the galaxy working on this problem, another council member said. What could you possibly add? Velshara gestured to Teeman. A human perspective. The chamber erupted in noise. Laughter, mostly. Some outrage. Teeman felt his face burn with shame and anger. You bring a human before this council? Kolveth sounded almost amused. Commander, your victory in the conquest games has earned you respect, but this borders on insult. Give him access to the battle data, Velshara said. 48 hours. If he provides nothing useful, I will withdraw this proposal and accept whatever censure you deem appropriate. And if we refuse, then you waste an opportunity because of pride. The swarm does not care about our pride. It will consume our worlds regardless. Kolveth was silent for a long moment. Very well. 48 hours. But when this fails, Commander, your career may fail with it. They gave Tiemann a small workspace and access to 3 years of battle data. Velshara left him alone, though he knew she was taking an enormous risk. Tiemann dove into the data. He wasn't a military expert, but he understood patterns. And what he saw was clear. The collective fought like a machine. Every tactic followed established doctrine. Every maneuver was based on proven strategies. Even their innovations were logical extensions of existing methods. The swarm learned all of it. It adapted to every pattern, countered every strategy. The more predictable the collective was, the faster the swarm evolved. Taemin thought about Geo's words. Humans don't fight logically. He thought about Earth's history, about guerrilla warfare and deception, about strategies that seemed stupid until they worked. He thought about every underdog story he'd ever heard, and he started writing. 40-8 hours later, he stood before the council again. Well? Kolveth demanded. What brilliant insights does the human offer? Tiemann took a breath. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. You're fighting the swarm wrong. You're too predictable. Our strategies are based on centuries of successful military operations. A council member objected. I know. That's the problem. The swarm learns from patterns. You keep showing it patterns. Tiemann pulled up a display. Look at this battle at Sector 7. You sent in a standard attack formation. The swarm countered it within 2 hours. Then you sent a secondary wave using a different standard formation. The swarm countered that too. You're teaching it how to beat you. What would you suggest? Random chaos? Controlled chaos, Tiemann said. Stop using proven tactics. Start using improvisation, feints, misdirection, strategies that don't make sense until they're already working. Make the swarm waste resources adapting to threats that aren't real. Hit it from angles it doesn't expect. That is not how military operations function, Kolveth said coldly. It's how humans fight when we're outmatched. And we usually are. Tiemann met the Supreme Arbiter's gaze. You have better technology, better weapons, better ships. But you think in straight lines. The swarm has learned your straight lines. Let me show you crooked ones. The council dismissed his proposal, called it reckless, naive, dangerous. They told Velshara she had wasted their time. But Velshara didn't accept defeat. I have a personal fleet, she told Tiemann later. 6 ships. Not enough to turn the war, but enough to test your theories. Will you help me? You'll be court-martialed if this fails. I will be dead if the swarm reaches my home world. I prefer the court-martial. She almost smiled. Besides, I claimed you as my prize. I intend to use you. They planned for a week. Tiemann worked with Velshara's tactical officers, teaching them to think differently, to question their assumptions, to embrace uncertainty. The officers hated it at first. Everything Tiemann suggested violated their training. But Velshara gave them no choice. The battle took place near a colony world the swarm was attacking. Velshara's 6 ships were vastly outnumbered, but they had one advantage. Unpredictability. Taemin watched from the command deck as the plan unfolded. First, they broadcast false communications suggesting a retreat. The swarm pursued. Then they scattered in 6 different directions, making the swarm split its forces. Then they regrouped in a pattern that made no mathematical sense, hitting the swarm from an angle that left 3 of its flanks exposed. When the swarm adapted and shifted to counter, Velshara's ships did something that horrified her own crew. they retreated in the opposite direction of safety, drawing the swarm into a debris field where they'd hidden explosive charges. The swarm tried to adapt, but adaptation requires patterns. Timon's strategy had no pattern. 4 hours later, Velshara's fleet achieved what larger forces had failed to do. They destroyed an entire swarm. Clustered out, the council couldn't ignore it. News of the victory spread quickly. A small human-advised fleet succeeding where massive conventional forces had failed. Kolveth summoned Velshara again. This time, the tone was different. "Explain how this was achieved," the Supreme Arbiter commanded. Velshara let Timon speak. He described every unorthodox decision, every illogical maneuver, every moment they'd violated standard military doctrine. "You won through chaos," a council member said. "We won through adaptability," Timon corrected. "The swarm adapts to patterns faster than you do. So we didn't use patterns. We changed our approach constantly. We made decisions based on immediate circumstances instead of predetermined strategies. We fought like humans fight." Kolveth was silent for a long time. "If we adopted these methods across our entire military, it would require retraining millions of soldiers, abandoning centuries of doctrine. Or you could just use humans," Timon said quietly. "We already think this way. It's natural to us." The chamber erupted in debate. Some council members saw the logic. Others refused to accept that humans could offer anything valuable. But while they argued, Timon received a message from Earth, from Huna. "I saw what you did. Everyone on Earth saw. Tay, people are talking about it. They're remembering that we're not weak. Whatever happens next, you changed something. I'm proud of you." Timon looked at Velshara. She was defending him to the council, her 4 arms gesturing sharply as she argued with beings who outranked her. He'd been her prize. Her gamble. Her proof that humans were worth more than the collective believed. And maybe, just maybe, it was working. The announcement came 3 weeks after Timon's victory. The collective would implement human integration protocols on a trial basis. Selected humans would be recruited for strategic and engineering positions. It was a small step, but it was something. Timon had one condition before he agreed to help further: the release of all humans, held as trophies or forced laborers. The council resisted. Velshara pushed. In the end, they compromised. Humans in military zones would be freed and offered real positions. Others would have their contracts reviewed. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. Huna called him the day the news reached Earth. She was crying. Something Timon had rarely seen. "Do you know what you've done?" She said, "People are celebrating in the streets. There's talk of humans being allowed into collective universities. Real jobs, Tay. Real respect. It's not enough yet. It's more than we've had in 200 years. Huna wiped her eyes. "I'm coming to help. They're putting together a human division. Medical support, research teams. I volunteered. It's dangerous. The swarm is everyone's problem now, including ours." She smiled. "Besides, you got to be the hero. Let me help too." The first group of human recruits arrived a month later. 50 people from Earth and the colonies, all volunteers. Timon was supposed to train them in strategic thinking, but he quickly realized they didn't need much training. They already thought the way he did. One of them was Doyon, a young man barely 20 years old. He'd grown up on a colony world and had been working in factories since he was 14. Now he was learning military tactics. "Is it true you beat the swarm with 6 ships?" Doyon asked him. "Commander Velshara beat them. I just suggested some ideas." "That's not what people are saying. They're saying you proved humans are as good as any species in the collective." "We're different," Timon said. "Not better, just different. And right now, Different is what's needed. The training was intense. Teeman worked with the recruits on simulations, teaching them to trust their instincts, to improvise, to stop second-guessing themselves when they had unconventional ideas. The alien instructors watched with a mixture of fascination and horror. Everything the humans did violated their training, but the results were undeniable. In simulation after simulation, human-led strategies succeeded where conventional approaches failed. Yoonji was part of the engineering team. She was brilliant, sharp-minded, and frustrated by how slowly the collective adopted new ideas. "Look at this," she told Teeman one day, showing him a collective shield generator. "This design is 300 years old. It works fine, so they never changed it. But I can make it 30% more efficient with some basic modifications." Why don't they? Because it's not how it's designed. They can't imagine changing something that already works. She grinned. But we can. That's our advantage. We don't have their mental blocks. Yoonji's team started reverse engineering collective technology. Not to steal it, but to improve it. And they succeeded in ways that shocked the original designers. A Vexial engineer watched Yoonji rebuild a power core and said, "This should not work. The energy flow contradicts the fundamental principles." "But it does work," Yoonji replied. "Maybe the principles are wrong." That was the human difference. They questioned everything. They didn't accept impossible as an answer, but not everyone was happy about it. TAEMI and started noticing problems. Equipment that mysteriously malfunctioned when humans were using it. Data files that went missing. Training sessions that were scheduled and then canceled without explanation. Someone was sabotaging the human integration program. He brought it to Velshara's attention. She wasn't surprised. "There are many in the collective who fear change," she said. "They see humans as a threat to the established order. We must be vigilant." The sabotage got worse. During one training exercise, a human pilot ship lost power in the middle of a simulation. It could have been fatal if they'd been in real space. Velshara launched an investigation. It led to a mid-level collective officer who believed humans were contaminating military doctrine. He was arrested, but Teeman knew he wasn't working alone. "They're afraid of us," Doyan said one night. "Good. That's not good," Teeman replied. "Fear makes people dangerous. We've been afraid of them for 200 years. Maybe it's time they felt what we felt." Teeman understood the anger. He felt it too. But anger wasn't going to win this war. What would win it was proving that humans deserved their place. Not through violence or revenge, but through capability. The opportunity came sooner than expected. The swarm launched a massive offensive toward the collective's core worlds. 3 heavily defended systems fell in a single week. The collective military was in chaos, unable to adapt fast enough to the swarm's relentless evolution. And one of the threatened worlds was Earth. The news hit the human recruits hard. Families, friends, home, all of it in danger. HYUNA sent Teeman a message. "The swarm is 2 weeks from Earth. What are we going to do?" The collective was mobilizing every available ship to defend the core worlds. But their strategies were still too conventional, too predictable. The swarm would adapt and overwhelm them. Teeman requested a meeting with Velshara and the senior command staff. "We need to commit everything to this battle," he said. "Not just ships. We need to use every advantage we have, including humans." "The human division is barely trained," a collective admiral objected. "They're not ready for a major engagement." "They're ready to fight for their home world," Teeman said. "And they'll fight in ways the swarm hasn't seen before." Velshara supported him. "The human recruits have proven themselves in simulations. This is what we trained them for." The debate raged for hours. Finally, the supreme arbiter made a decision. "Very well. The human division will participate in the defense, but they will be under Commander Velshara's direct command. If this fails, the responsibility is yours, Commander. I accept that responsibility, Velshara said. She turned to Teeman. Can your people do this? They're scared. They're angry. They're fighting for everything they love. Teeman met her silver gaze. Yes, they can do this. The call went out to every human in the collective. Volunteers were needed. Not just soldiers, but engineers, pilots, tacticians. Anyone who could help. Thousands responded. From Earth, from colony worlds, from mining stations and research facilities. Humans who had been treated as second-class citizens for their entire lives, now stepping forward to defend the very civilization that had oppressed them. Yuna came with a team of medics. Yoonji brought her engineering innovations. Doyan joined the fighter squadrons. Teeman found himself in a position he'd never imagined. Strategic advisor to a fleet defending Earth. The swarm was coming. But for the first time in the war, the collective had something the swarm couldn't predict. They had humans who refused to accept defeat. The night before the battle, Teeman stood at the window of Velshara's ship, looking at Earth, the blue and green world where he'd been born, where humanity had survived ice ages and plagues, wars and disasters. Velshara joined him at the window. Are you afraid? She asked. Terrified, Teeman admitted. Good, you should be. But remember, fear makes humans creative. She paused. I claimed you as a prize. But you have become far more than that. You have become a symbol of what your species can achieve. I'm just one person. So was the woman who saved my home world. One person can change everything. Velshara's crystalline hand rested briefly on his shoulder. Tomorrow, you will show the galaxy what humanity truly is. Teeman looked at the stars, at the fleet gathering to defend Earth, at the future that hung in the balance. Then we'd better make it count. The swarm arrived at the shattered ring defensive line like a dark tide consuming stars. Millions of organic ships, pulsing with bioluminescence, moving with hive mind precision. The collective had built the defensive line around a massive ring structure left behind by an ancient civilization. It was humanity's last barrier before Earth.TAEMIN stood on the command deck of Velshara's flagship, surrounded by screens showing the battlefield. The collective fleet was enormous, thousands of ships from dozens of species. But the swarm was bigger. Conventional forces are in position, Velshara reported. Human divisions are ready. The swarm will be in weapons range in 20 minutes. Teeman felt the weight of every decision pressing down on him. Millions of lives depended on what happened next. His sister was out there in a medical ship. Doyan was in a fighter squadron. Yoonji was managing engineering teams across the fleet. He took a breath and opened the communications channel to the entire human division. This is Teeman. I know you're scared. I am too. But remember what we are. We're the species that survived ice ages with stone tools. We're the people who went to space in metal boxes held together with bolts and hope. We don't win because we're stronger. We win because we refuse to quit. He paused, looking at the approaching swarm. Today, we show them what humans do when everything is on the line. We improvise. We adapt. We fight dirty if we have to. And we protect our home. The responses came flooding back. Affirmatives from across the fleet. Humans ready to prove they belonged. The swarm hit the defensive line like a hammer. The conventional, collective forces fought bravely, but within an hour, the pattern was clear. Every tactic they used, the swarm countered. Every formation, every strategy, the hive mind adapted and overwhelmed. We're losing ground on the left flank, an officer reported. Send in the human squadrons, Teeman ordered. Execute Plan Chaos 1. Doyen's fighter wings screamed into the battle zone. But instead of attacking the swarm head-on, they scattered in what looked like panic. The swarm pursued, splitting its forces to chase them down. Then the fighters regrouped in impossible formations, hitting the swarm from angles that made no tactical sense. They used the debris field like cover, flying patterns that would have failed any collective flight test, but worked perfectly in combat. The swarm tried to adapt, but there was nothing to adapt to. Every maneuver was different, every attack unpredictable. "It's working," Velshara said, watching the display. "The swarm is wasting resources trying to counter threats that keep changing." "That's just the opening," Tiemann replied. "Now we really get started." He activated the second phase. Human engineering teams had modified civilian ships, turning them into decoys that broadcast false signals. The ships flew into the swarm formation, screaming distress calls, mimicking damaged vessels. The swarm, programmed to target vulnerable prey, diverted massive forces to destroy them. The ships exploded, but not from swarm weapons. Yunji had packed them with explosives that detonated in patterns designed to create maximum confusion. The swarm suddenly found itself in the middle of debris clouds that blocked its sensors. In that moment of blindness, Velshara's main fleet struck, but the swarm was adapting. It began ignoring the decoys, focusing on real threats. It shifted formations to counter the chaotic human tactics. "They're learning," Velshara said. "Faster than anticipated." Tiemann saw it too. The swarm was dangerous because it could evolve in real time. They needed something it couldn't predict at all. He made a decision that terrified him. "Open a channel to all ships. I'm uploading new orders. Every captain, every pilot, every tactical officer has full authority to make independent decisions. No coordination, no patterns, pure improvisation." The collective officers looked horrified. "That will create chaos across the entire fleet." "Exactly." Tiemann met Velshara's eyes. "The swarm adapts to patterns. We're going to give it no pattern at all. Every ship fights its own way." Velshara understood immediately. "Do it." The fleet dissolved into beautiful chaos. Every human captain started using their own tactics. Some retreated when they should have advanced. Others charged when they should have retreated. Ships coordinated in groups of 2 or 3, then broke apart. Fighters used maneuvers that violated every safety protocol. The swarm's adaptation system overloaded. It couldn't find a pattern because there wasn't one. Every time it shifted to counter one threat, 3 more appeared from completely different angles. But the cost was high. Ships were being destroyed. Lives were being lost. Tiemann watched the casualty reports, climbing, and felt each one like a physical blow. "We can't sustain this," an officer said. "The swarm will overwhelm us through sheer numbers." Tiemann looked at the battle display. The officer was right. They were holding, but barely. They needed something more, something the swarm couldn't possibly counter. He thought about what Velshara had told him, about the human slave who saved billions by doing something impossible. "I have an idea," Tiemann said, "but it's going to sound crazy." "At this point, crazy is our specialty," Velshara replied. "What if we let the swarm capture me?" The command deck went silent. "Explain," Velshara demanded. "The swarm uses a hive mind network. Yunji's been analyzing it. If we could get inside that network, we could upload a virus directly. But it requires physical contact with a swarm vessel." Tiemann pulled up the data. "I volunteer to be bait. Let them take me. I'll carry a virus designed to disrupt their coordination. That is suicide. Maybe, but if it works, we win. If it doesn't, you lose one person instead of billions." Velshara's forearms tensed. "I did not claim you as a prize only to sacrifice you. You claimed me to save the collective. This is how I do it." The argument raged for precious minutes. Finally, Velshara agreed, but with one condition. She would lead the rescue team personally. Yunji worked frantically to design the virus. It had to be something the swarm couldn't detect, something that would spread through their network before they realized it was there. This is based on human neurological patterns, she explained. The swarm won't recognize it as a threat because it's not based on any technology they've encountered. It's based on how human minds work. Chaotic, unpredictable, emotional. Teeman took the virus implant and boarded a small ship. It was modified to look damaged, broadcasting distress signals that the swarm couldn't resist. Huna's voice came over his personal communicator. "Tay, you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do. Take care of everyone. You come back. That's an order from your big sister." The swarm took the bait. Teeman's ship was captured within minutes. Organic tendrils wrapped around it, pulling it into a massive hive vessel. He felt the walls close in, felt the alien presence of the hive mind pressing against his consciousness. But he also felt something else. Fear. Pure, hewn fear. The kind that makes you want to run, to fight, to do anything to survive. And that fear was the key. He activated the virus. It spread through the swarm's network like a disease, carrying with it the chaos of human emotion, the unpredictability of human thought. The swarm tried to adapt, but you can't adapt to something that has no pattern. The hive mind began to fracture. Outside, Velshara saw the swarm formation suddenly break apart. Ships lost coordination, started attacking each other, drifted without purpose. "Now," she commanded. "All forces attack." The collective fleet struck with everything they had. The disorganized swarm couldn't mount an effective defense, but Velshara didn't celebrate. She was already moving. Her ship punched through the swarm lines, heading straight for the hive vessel holding Teeman. Her crew thought she was insane, but they followed anyway. They breached the hive vessel's hull. Velshara led the boarding team personally, her 4 arms wielding weapons with deadly precision. They fought through organic corridors, through swarm defenders, until they found Teeman. He was barely conscious. The hive mind had been trying to absorb him. But he was alive. "Told you it would work," he mumbled as Velshara pulled him free. "You are an idiot," she said. But her voice was gentle. They escaped just as the hive vessel began to collapse from the virus spreading through its systems. The battle turned into a rout. Without coordination, the swarm was just a collection of dangerous but disorganized ships. The collective forces destroyed them methodically. By the time the sun rose over Earth, the swarm offensive was broken. Teeman woke up in a medical bay 3 days later. Huna was sitting beside him, looking exhausted but relieved. "You're an idiot," she said, echoing Velshara's words. "So I've been told. You're also a hero. The Council wants to see you." The ceremony was held on Earth, the first time a major collective event had been held on a human world. Supreme Arbiter Kolveth addressed the gathered crowds. "Today, we ratify the Terra Accords. Humanity is granted full citizenship in the collective, full sovereignty over Earth and its colonies, full representation in the Council. This is earned, not given." Teeman stood on the stage, still recovering from his injuries. Beside him were Doyan, Yunji, Huna, and dozens of other humans who had fought and Velshara, who had risked everything on a gamble that humans mattered. Later, away from the crowds, Teeman and Velshara stood together watching the sunset. "I claimed you as a prize," Velshara said. "But in the end, you freed us all." "We freed each other," Teeman replied. "You gave humans a chance. We just proved we deserved it. What will you do now?" "Help rebuild. Train more humans. Make sure this changes things permanently." He looked at her. "What about you?" "The same. The war is not over. The swarm will return. But next time, we will be ready. Because we learned something from humans. What's that? That survival requires not just strength, but adaptability. Not just logic, but creativity. Not just following rules, but knowing when to break them. Galshara's silver eyes reflected the setting sun. Humanity taught the galaxy that being different is not weakness. It is evolution. In the streets below, humans celebrated their new freedom. Children ran through the crowds, laughing. People who had been slaves were now citizens. And somewhere in the collective, other species watched and learned that the human era had begun. Not through conquest, but through courage. Not through force, but through ingenuity. Not through becoming like everyone else, but through showing the galaxy that being human, with all its chaos and emotion and stubborn refusal to accept defeat, was exactly what the universe needed. Taemin smiled. He'd been a prize, a test, a gamble. Now he was just a human who changed everything.